particular part in another triangle. But in order to get to knowing that, we would have to first know that the triangles are congruent so that we could say that those parts are congruent. So that's all about this theorem right here, called CPCTC, which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, so CPCTC. Skips the and the R when they abbreviate it there. So the first thing we're going to do is just refresh our memory about what all the parts are that are congruent if your triangles are congruent. And we're just going to do one of these first two. We're just going to do number 1. So I'm going to list the sides first and then I'll list the angles. Corresponding sides that would be congruent if our triangles are congruent is that side RS, based on this statement, RS is the first 2 letters, would be congruent to side XZ. We'll mark those. And then we could have second 2 letters would be ST, congruent to ZY. And then first and last would be RT, congruent to first and last XY. So those would be our 3 sets of sides that would be congruent. And now I'll list the angles. The angles that would be congruent would be angle R congruent to angle X. Angle S would be congruent to angle Z. And I know these are separated triangles, which only has 1 angle at each letter. If it had more than 1 angle at each letter, I'd have to use 3 letters when I named it. And then angle T congruent to angle Y. So those would be the 6 sets of corresponding congruent parts of these triangles. So if I prove these triangles congruent, I would be able to say any of these statements based on the fact that they're congruent. And if I was doing a proof, my reason for that would be CPCTC. So let's look at some at the bottom of this page here, where they are asking us to tell which triangles you can show congruent and what postulator theorem you would use. So I'm going to basically be doing, like, if I was doing a proof, I'm going to do the last 2 steps of the proof, which is what triangle is congruent, what's the reason, and then what am I showing congruent, and the reason that I'm saying they're congruent. So in this first picture, I notice that I've got 2 sides and an angle, and the angle is not in the middle, which means that it could be side-side angle or angle side-side, which would be bad, and I cannot use that for a reason. So remember that when it is a right angle here, though, think about that hypotenuse leg, that special time, that one oddball theorem. So it was looking like angle side side. Remember that there's no cuss words in geometry, so that's not our reason. So we got to see if it's HL, and if not, then they're not congruent. So our triangles are congruent. We need to name them in the right order and corresponding order. So I'm just going to say ABC for this first one. The first one doesn't matter. The second one you have to name in corresponding order. So A was at the end of this line that has 1 mark on it, and over here was the one with 2. So A is between those 2. In this picture, D is between those 2. So D would be there. Then B is the right angle, so E has to match up in the middle because B was in the middle, and then F. So those are congruent by HL. And then I would be able to say that angle C is congruent to angle F by CPCTC. Corresponding parts congruent, triangles congruent. So that's what I would do on that one. On this one in the middle here, I notice that there's 2 angles and a side, and then 2 angles and a side. The side's not between the angles in this one. And on the right, this triangle, the side's not between the angles. And looking at the markings, do they match up? It's like they reflected it kind of and moved it, but it does match up. all the things are in the corresponding locations, so they are matching. And there's two angles on the side that's not in the middle. So the triangles are going to be congruent. I'm going to say TSR. And then triangle, I started with this marked angle, so I need to start with the L that matches it. Then I went to the right angle, so now I need to go to M and then N. And then the reason that those are congruent is angle, angle, side. And then we're able to say the statement they wanted us to say, which is that RT is congruent to LN by CPCTC. So I'm just going to move this over so I have a little bit more room. Whoops. Okay, making room. Wow. Whoops. Okay, move that. Sorry. Okay. Well, that's not going to work. Anyhow. There we go. Gotta have room for this last problem. Okay, on the last one, well, I've got two angles in the side that is between the angles. So I'm looking at angle, side, angle. So I need to name them, and they are matching. They do both have angle, side, angle going on here. So I'm going to say CD. And then C had one mark, D had none, E has two. So I have to go in the same order when I name over here. So I started with C, so I have to start with F. Then I went to D, so I have to go to H next, and then to G. And it's not really that it's alphabetical order. It has to be, however you name the first one, you have to match up the corresponding pieces of the next one. So going by angle markings is really the easiest way to be sure that you're doing that. And the reason these are congruent, two angles in the side that's between, so angle, side angle is the reason they're congruent. And then we're able to say what they wanted us to say, which was up here, that angle D is congruent to angle H by CPCTC.